I'd like to add a little bit more to what Doug is telling you about creating shapes and more interesting shapes. I'm going to start out with some basic shapes. Again, these you can find over here in your toolbox. If you go down, whatever shape is showing up here, you'll notice that there's that little darkened corner, which means that there's more there. We've got the rectangle tool, the ellipse tool, polygonal tool, star tool. We'll get to some of these in a second, but first let's just deal with a simple rectangle out here. This is, let me turn off my guides. Um, this is what's called a simple path. Um, the reason for that is that it is defined as a simple path because as Illustrator looks at it, you go from no shape to no shape as you kind of look across that in each direction. Um, if we look at it in outline view, you see that. I'm going to let's create an ellipse on top of that. And what I'm going to do here actually is I'm going to hold down the Option key and the Shift key. That will constrain that circle to being a perfect circle drawn from the inside as opposed to being drawn from a corner, right? So now that thing is a perfect circle drawn from the inside by holding down the Option key and the Shift key, which constrains it to being a perfect circle. It's really handy to be able to place things. If you can use the Option key, you can put their center right where you want it to be. Let me change the color of this so that, let's just go to properties and then we'll go to the fill color and let's just make it red on this case. So right now I've got a red circle on top of a blue square. Um, these are both simple shapes right now. Let me make this one smaller. I'm just going to click on it, and by holding Option and Shift down, I can reduce its size and reduce it from the center, or increase it from the center if I wanted to go the opposite direction. But right now I've got a red circle on top of a blue square, right? These are two simple shapes. If I select both of those by clicking and dragging over them, I can go to Object and I can go down to Compound Path and Make. This will work 90% of the time for you, but it doesn't always. Sometimes you'll have to do something else, like use the Pathfinder palette and do a minus front, right? Or you could even do something like an exclude, which would do the same kind of thing, but you can see that it changes the color to whatever the top color was in that case, right? And also the exclude would do something where you could have something along these lines with that. Anyway, so you could also create a compound shape by doing something like that. Or hopefully this will always work for you, but it doesn't always. Oh, I gotta have it selected. Um, Object, compound, shape, make, right? Now, the difference here, as opposed to the simple path that we had before, is if you're thinking of it in, kind of linear terms, we have no shape, shape, no shape, shape, no shape. So that's makes this a compound path with that. Meaning also that we can put a color field, let me get a color field behind it. Object, let me select this, object, arrange, send to back, and you can see the color field or whatever is behind it in this case, right? That's a compound path. Um, very handy to know the difference. And you can also say, okay, I'll take that path and I can release that compound path, right? And now I've got that circle. It's taken on the attributes of the color of the square that it was with before. But now I can, release that. And you might we'll play around with some of that a little bit later too, but understanding the difference between a simple path and a compound path is really helpful. I'm going to get rid of these because I want to show you something else about, oops, I meant to hit delete. Here we go. Other things about these tools, I'm on the rectangle tool right now. If I go out and not click and drag, but simply click, I can be very specific about the size of the rectangle. A dialog box will come up. I can type in the size I want it to be and say OK. And now I get a rectangle of that size from the place where I clicked in that sense, right? So that also obviously works with the other tools. If I want to have a perfect circle and I have to have it in a specific spot, I might hold down my Option key, click, and then say I want a 5 by 5, oops, not a 55, that would be gigantic, 5 by 5 inch circle from that center point. And now I've got that there. Likewise, that will also work with things like the star tool, right? If I come out here, I can, let me change the color of this to something a little darker. If I just click and drag, I can get a star tool and kind of adjust its, how it rotates, or if I hold down the shift key, it will constrain it so that it is perfectly vertical and horizontal in that way. Or I could also just click, and now I've got these options with the star tool where I can define how many points it has and what the radius is of the different points here. This first radius is from the center to this point, and the second radius is from the center to that point. So you can adjust those things to get them to be a different kind of star, if you will. For instance, let's say we've got a radius of 1.5 here, not 15, 1.5, and let's do 0.5 with this and see what we get, right? It's a different kind of star. So you could play around with those numbers and get different kinds of stars, or even stars that have more points, for instance. And so just clicking out into the space while you're on one of these tools will give you the option to define the parameters of that shape that you were drawing out there.